The notification chimed on my phone at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that would fracture my world into before and after. I was sitting in AP chemistry, half listening to Mrs. Rodriguez explain molecular bonds while sketching future lab equipment in the margins of my notebook, the kind I'd use at Stanford when I became a biomedical engineer, the kind my college fund was supposed to buy. Balance, $247.83. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred, then sharpened into cruel focus. $247.83. Not the $47,000 that should have been there, not even close to the careful accumulation of 18 years of birthday money, summer job wages, and scholarship prize money that I'd been religiously depositing since I was old enough to understand what college cost. If you're already feeling the shock of Emma's discovery, you're about to witness a journey that will challenge everything you think you know about family loyalty versus justice. This story gets intense, so if you're finding it gripping so far, please hit that like button and share it with others who appreciate powerful, true stories. Subscribe for more content that doesn't shy away from difficult truths. My hands trembled as I refreshed the banking app, certain it was a glitch, some technical error that would restore my future with a simple reload. But the number remained, stark and devastating against the blue screen. Around me, classmates continued taking notes, their pencils scratching against paper in a rhythm that suddenly sounded like nails on a chalkboard. "Miss Chen, is there something more interesting on your phone than covalent bonding?" Mrs. Rodriguez's voice cut through my panic, but it sounded distant, underwater. I need to use the restroom," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, concern flickering across her weathered face as I stumbled toward the door, clutching my phone like a lifeline to a sinking ship. The hallway stretched endlessly before me, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps. My sneakers squeaked against the polished linoleum as I half ran, half walked toward the girls' bathroom, desperate for privacy to confirm what my heart already knew. The bathroom smelled of industrial disinfectant and teenage perfume. I locked myself in the far stall and called the bank's customer service line with shaking fingers. The hold music, some cheerful instrumental version of a song I couldn't identify, felt like mockery as I waited, watching other girls come and go, their conversations about weekend plans and homework assignments floating around me like I was a ghost haunting my own life. "First National Bank, this is Rebecca. How can I help you today?" "I need to check on recent transactions for my savings account," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded when everything inside me was screaming. I rattled off my account number from memory. I'd memorized it years ago, checking my balance so frequently that the digits were burned into my brain like a prayer. "I see several large withdrawals over the past 2 weeks," Rebecca said, her tone professionally neutral. "Would you like me to read them to you?" The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "Yes, please." October 15th, withdrawal of $15,000. October 18th, withdrawal of $12,000. October 22nd, withdrawal of $20,000. All transactions were made in person at our downtown branch with proper identification and account authorization. "No," I whispered, ending the call before my voice could betray the earthquake happening inside my chest. I sat on the closed toilet seat, staring at the graffitied door, my mind racing through possibilities, explanations, anything that could make this make sense. Maybe there was an emergency. Maybe someone was sick. Maybe Mom had borrowed it temporarily and forgot to tell me, planning to replace it before I noticed. But even as I grasped at these fragile hopes, I knew better. I knew exactly where my money had gone. The bell rang, signaling the end of chemistry class, and suddenly the bathroom filled with chattering girls, reapplying lip gloss and complaining about pop quizzes. I waited until the noise faded, then emerged from the stall like a different person than the one who'd entered. The girl in the mirror looked the same. Shoulder-length black hair, dark eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the small scar on her chin from falling off her bike at age 7. But inside, something fundamental had shifted, crystallized into a cold, hard certainty. I walked through the rest of the day on autopilot, sitting through calculus and English literature without hearing a single word. My best friend Maya tried to talk to me at lunch, her voice bouncing off me like rain on a window. "Earth to Emma," she said, waving a hand in front of my face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I lied, picking at my sandwich without tasting it. How could I explain that I had seen a ghost, the ghost of my future disappearing before my eyes? The final bell couldn't come too soon. I practically ran to the parking lot, my backpack bouncing against my spine as I fumbled for my car keys. The drive home passed in a blur of stop signs and traffic lights, my mind churning with fragments of conversation I'd overheard in recent weeks. Mom whispering into her phone late at night, brochures for cosmetic surgery clinics appearing on the kitchen counter, then quickly disappearing. My sister Jade's new confidence, the way she'd been examining her profile in every mirror, talking about finally feeling beautiful. Our house sat at the end of Maple Street, a modest 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a front porch that Mom had painted white every spring since Dad left 5 years ago. It looked exactly the same as always, but now it felt like a trap, like a movie set hiding something sinister behind its cheerful facade. I found Mom in the kitchen, stirring something that smelled like garlic and herbs. She looked up when I entered, her smile bright and automatic, the same smile she'd worn while systematically draining my future. "Hey, sweetheart, how was school? I'm making your favorite, chicken and dumplings." The normalcy of it, the casual domesticity, made my stomach turn. She stood there in her flowered apron, gray streaks threading through her brown hair, looking like every mother in every heartwarming commercial. Not like a thief. Not like someone who would steal her own daughter's dreams. "Where's my money?" The words came out flat, emotionless. Mom's stirring slowed, then stopped. "What money, honey?" "My college fund. $47,000. It's gone." She set down the wooden spoon carefully, precisely, buying herself time. "Emma, I can explain. Explain how you stole from me." My voice cracked, all my careful control shattering at once. "Explain how you took 18 years of my life and gave it to Jade for a nose job?" "It wasn't like that." Mom's voice dropped to a whisper, her eyes darting toward the stairs where Jade might be listening. "She was so unhappy, Emma, so depressed about how she looked. The kids at school were cruel. So you decided I shouldn't go to college?" The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the yellow walls closing in around us. "You decided my future was worth less than her vanity?" "That's not fair." Mom's voice turned sharp, defensive. "Jade needed this. She was talking about hurting herself, Emma. What was I supposed to do?" The manipulation in her words hit me like a slap. Even now, caught red-handed, she was trying to make me the villain for wanting my own money back, for having dreams that apparently mattered less than my sister's insecurities. "You were supposed to be my mother," I said, each word carefully enunciated. "You were supposed to protect what was mine." Footsteps on the stairs announced Jade's arrival, and she appeared in the doorway like a ghost from my childhood nightmares. Except now she had a perfect nose, sculpted and symmetrical, nothing like the slightly crooked one we'd shared from Dad's side of the family. She looked beautiful, confident, everything the money was supposed to buy her, everything that had cost me my future. "What's going on?" Jade asked, though her eyes told me she already knew. "Your sister found out about the loan," Mom said, the word loan dripping with false hope. "Loan?" I laughed, high and bitter. "Is that what we're calling theft now?" Jade's new perfect nose wrinkled with annoyance. "God, Emma is being so dramatic. It's not like you can't get financial aid or whatever. There are scholarships." "There were scholarships," I interrupted, "merit-based ones that require me to attend specific schools. schools that cost more than financial aid covers, schools that I chose based on having that money as backup. So choose different schools, Jade said with a shrug that cost $47,000. I stared at my sister, this stranger with my father's eyes, and a nose bought with my dreams, and something cold and final settled in my chest. She didn't understand. Neither of them did. They saw money as something fluid, transferable, as if dreams could be exchanged like currency at whatever rate served their purposes. But I understood something they didn't. I understood that actions have consequences, that theft is theft regardless of family ties, that some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive. "I'm going to get my money back," I said quietly. Mom's face paled. "Emma, please, we're family. We can work this out." "No," I said, backing toward the doorway. "We can't." I climbed the stairs to my room, each step measured and deliberate. Behind me, I could hear Mom and Jade whispering urgently, their voices rising and falling like the tide. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was thinking about federal banking laws, about fraud statutes, and the FBI's white-collar crime division, about the research I'd done for my senior project on financial crimes, research that suddenly felt like preparation for this exact moment. My laptop hummed to life on my desk, the screen casting a blue glow across college acceptance letters tacked to my bulletin board. Stanford, MIT, Johns Hopkins, all of them contingent on finances I no longer had. But there were other kinds of justice in the world, other ways to make things right. I opened a new browser tab and began to type, "How to report bank fraud to federal authorities." The search results filled my screen like a roadmap to revenge, and for the first time since seeing that balance notification, I smiled. The FBI's website glowed on my laptop screen at 2:17 a.m., the harsh blue light making my eyes water as I scrolled through reporting procedures for the third time. Sleep had become impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that bank balance, heard Jade's casual dismissal of my future, felt the weight of Mom's betrayal settling deeper into my bones like winter cold. I'd researched for 6 hours straight, my notebook filled with handwritten details about federal banking fraud statutes, jurisdictional requirements, and evidence collection protocols. The bureaucratic language was dense, clinical, but beneath it lay a thread of hope, a path forward that didn't require forgiveness or family meetings or pretending that stealing was somehow acceptable when wrapped in maternal concern. Bank fraud involving amounts over $1,000 was a federal crime, punishable by up to 30 years in prison and fines up to $1 million. The words should have felt like victory, but instead they sat heavy in my stomach like stones. This wasn't some stranger who'd hacked my account. This was my mother, the woman who'd taught me to tie my shoes and helped me with math homework and cried at my high school graduation. But she was also the woman who'd looked me in the eye while systematically emptying my future, who'd chosen Jade's vanity over my education, who'd stolen not just money, but years of careful planning, of dreams deferred and sacrifices made. The woman who'd called it a loan while knowing she'd never be able to pay it back. My phone buzzed against the desk, a text from Maya. "Can't sleep either? Want to talk?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Maya had been my best friend since middle school, but how could I explain this? How could I tell her that I was considering reporting my own mother to federal law enforcement? That I was choosing nuclear war over family peace? "Just stressed about applications," I typed back, which wasn't entirely a lie. Stanford's early admission deadline was 2 weeks away, and without my college fund, my carefully crafted plans were crumbling like a house built on sand. "Coffee tomorrow before school?" Maya responded. "I have news that might cheer you up." I agreed and set the phone aside, returning to my research. The FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center had detailed instructions for reporting financial fraud, but something nagged at me about jurisdiction and evidence requirements. I needed more than just my word against Mom's. I needed documentation, proof of intent, evidence that would stand up in federal court. The house creaked around me, old woods settling in the darkness. Through my bedroom wall, I could hear Jade's soft snoring, the sound of someone sleeping peacefully while my world collapsed. She'd gotten her surgery 3 weeks ago, spending my recovery time posting selfies and accepting compliments from classmates who had no idea what her new confidence had cost. I opened a new tab and searched for our local FBI field office, memorizing the address and phone numbers. The Cleveland office was 45 minutes away, close enough to drive after school, far enough that I wouldn't accidentally run into anyone I knew. The thought of walking into that federal building, of sitting across from agents in suits and explaining how my mother had destroyed my future, made my chest tight with anxiety. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was accepting that my dreams meant less than Jade's insecurities, that 18 years of careful saving could be erased with a family sob story, that theft was acceptable when dressed up as maternal love. Dawn crept through my curtains like an unwelcome visitor, gray light filtering across my desk where legal documents and bank statements lay scattered like evidence at a crime scene. I'd printed everything: account records, transaction histories, college cost analyses that showed exactly how much I needed and when. The paper trail was damning, undeniable proof that Mom had known exactly what she was taking and why it mattered. I showered and dressed mechanically, armor of normalcy over the war zone of my emotions. Downstairs, Mom stood at the stove making pancakes, her movements cheerful and deliberate. She looked up when I entered, hope flickering across her face. "I made your favorite," she said, gesturing to the stack of blueberry pancakes, "with real maple syrup, not that artificial stuff." The domesticity felt like a slap. She was trying to buy forgiveness with breakfast, to smooth over felony theft with comfort food and maternal love. I poured myself coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching her bustle around the kitchen like nothing had changed. "We should talk," she said finally, settling across from me with her own mug. "About yesterday. About everything." "There's nothing to talk about." I kept my voice steady, neutral. "You stole my money. I want it back." "Emma, please." Her voice cracked with exhaustion, and I noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly around her coffee mug. "I know how this looks."
But I was desperate. Jade was so unhappy, so lost. She wasn't eating, barely sleeping. The kids at school were cruel about her appearance, and I thought, "You thought my future was expendable?" I finished. "No!" The word came out sharp, defensive. "I thought we could figure something out. Community college for the first 2 years, then transfer. Or wait a year, take a gap year while we save up again." The casual way she restructured my entire life plan made my blood burn. I had scholarships, Mom, merit scholarships that required me to start at specific schools in specific programs. Scholarships that you knew about because I showed you every acceptance letter, every award notification. Mom's face crumpled. "I know, sweetheart. I know I messed up, but we're family. We figure things out together. We don't—" She gestured helplessly. "We don't involve outsiders in family business." Outsiders? The word felt foreign on my tongue. What outsiders? Her eyes darted away, and I realized she'd been listening last night, had heard me typing, had perhaps even seen the glow from my laptop under the door crack. She knew exactly what kind of outsiders I was considering. "Emma, listen to me." Mom leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "If you involve the authorities, if you make this bigger than it needs to be, you'll destroy this family. Not just me, all of us. Jade's already been through so much, and if this becomes public, if there are legal consequences—" The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. Even now she was trying to make Lee responsible for the family's well-being, as if I was the one choosing destruction over harmony, as if reporting a crime was somehow more damaging than committing it. "Where's the money now?" I asked. "Gone," she whispered. "The surgery, the recovery care, the follow-up appointments, it's all gone, Emma. I can't give it back because I don't have it." The finality of those words hit me like a physical blow. I'd known, logically, that the money was spent. Jade's new face was evidence enough, but hearing it confirmed made my last fragile hopes crumble. So that's it? 18 years of saving gone because Jade didn't like her nose? It wasn't about vanity. Mom's voice turned sharp again. She was genuinely suffering. And I'm not? The question exploded out of me, loud enough for Mom to flinch. You think watching my future disappear isn't suffering? You think having my trust destroyed isn't painful? Footsteps on the stairs announced Jade's arrival, and she appeared in the doorway looking perfectly put together despite the early hour. Her new nose caught the morning light, casting delicate shadows that enhanced her entire face. She looked like a different person, confident, beautiful, everything the money was supposed to buy. "What's all the yelling about?" Jade asked, though her careful tone suggested she'd been listening from the stairway. "Your sister is being unreasonable," Mom said, and I marveled at how quickly she had shifted from pleading to accusation. "I'm being unreasonable?" I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "I'm not the one who committed federal banking fraud." "Oh my God, Emma, you're so dramatic. It's not fraud when it's family money." "Family money?" The words came out strangled. "I earned that money. Every birthday, every summer job, every scholarship prize, I put it in that account myself." "Yeah, but Mom's on the account too. That makes it joint property or whatever." I stared at my sister, at this person who had lived in my house for 18 years, but apparently existed in a completely different moral universe. To her, my dreams were negotiable, my sacrifices meaningless, my future something that could be reallocated based on whoever cried loudest. "You don't get it," I said finally. "Neither of you do."
We get it, Mom said quickly. We understand you're disappointed. Disappointed? I laughed, sharp and bitter. I'm not disappointed, Mom. I'm destroyed. You took everything I worked for and gave it away like it meant nothing. It doesn't mean nothing, Jade said, her new, perfect nose wrinkling with annoyance. But my mental health matters too. My happiness matters too. Not more than mine, I said quietly. The kitchen fell silent, the weight of that statement hanging between us like a challenge. This was the heart of it, the fundamental disagreement that no amount of family meetings or compromise could resolve. They believed Jade's immediate needs trumped my long-term dreams. They believed theft was acceptable when motivated by love. They believed I should sacrifice my future to maintain family peace. But 18 years of work and planning should count for something more than empty promises to figure it out somehow. "I have to go to school," I said, grabbing my backpack from the counter. "Emma, wait." Mom reached for my arm, but I pulled away. "We'll talk tonight," she called after me. "We'll figure something out." But I was already walking away, already planning my route to the FBI field office, already composing the words I'd use to explain how my family had imploded over $47,000 and a nose job. The drive to school passed in a blur of suburban streets and morning traffic. I parked in my usual spot and sat in the car for a moment, watching my classmates stream toward the building with their backpacks and coffee cups and normal teenage problems. None of them were deciding whether to report their mothers to federal law enforcement. None of them were weighing family loyalty against personal justice. Maya found me at my locker, practically vibrating with excitement. "Okay, you look terrible, but I have news that's going to make your day," she said, bouncing on her toes. "What news?" "Collins is retiring," she grinned broadly. "Our chemistry teacher is taking early retirement, and they need someone to finish the semester. They're looking for a substitute with actual chemistry background, not just some random person with a teaching certificate." I stared at her blankly. "Okay." "Emma! Think about it. You're the smartest person in our class. You've been tutoring kids in chemistry since sophomore year. You could apply to be the substitute teacher and make actual money, good money, instead of the minimum wage stuff you've been doing." The irony was crushing. Maya thought she was offering me a lifeline, a way to earn college money, but she had no idea that my college fund had already been gone, spent on my sister's vanity. She was trying to help me build something that had already been destroyed. That's actually a great idea," I said, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. "I'll look into it." Maya beamed and launched into details about the application process, but her voice faded into background noise as my mind wandered to darker calculations. If I did report my mom to the FBI, what would happen to our family? Would she go to prison? Would we lose the house? Would Jade blame me forever for destroying the life that my money had helped build?
The questions followed me through AP English, through calculus, through lunch where I pushed food around my plate while Maya chattered about college applications and weekend plans. Normal teenage concerns that felt as foreign to me as speaking another language. During study hall, I slipped away to the computer lab and pulled up the FBI's reporting website again. The forms looked different in daylight, less like instruments of justice and more like weapons of mass destruction. Filling them out would be easy. I had all the information, all the evidence, all the legal justification I needed. But it would also be irreversible. Once I submitted that report, once federal agents started investigating, there would be no taking it back. No family meetings, no compromises, no gentle solutions that preserved everyone's dignity. There would only be justice, clean and absolute, and utterly destructive. I started typing, my fingers moving across the keyboard like they belonged to someone else. Name, address, relationship to suspect, description of the crime. The words looked stark against the white screen, official and final and terrifying. But they also looked like hope, like consequences, like a future where actions mattered and dreams couldn't be stolen without price. I was halfway through the report when the bell rang, jolting me back to the present. My classmates gathered their books and headed to their next classes, but I remained frozen at the computer lab, cursor blinking in the description field like a heartbeat. One more paragraph, and it would be done. One more paragraph, and there would be no going back. My finger hovered over the submit button as the computer lab emptied around me, leaving me alone with my decision and its terrible, necessary consequences. I hit submit at 3:42 p.m. on a Wednesday, sitting in my car in the school parking lot while rain drummed against the windshield like accusations. The FBI complaint confirmation appeared on my phone screen, case number IC 25847392, and with it the point of no return crystallized in my chest, like ice forming over a pond. There was a strange peace in having made the choice, a terrible clarity that came with burning bridges behind you. The report was filed, the wheels of federal justice set in motion, and somewhere in a field office 45 minutes away, agents would soon be reading about how Patricia Chen of 1247 Maple Street had systematically stolen $47,000 from her daughter's college fund to finance cosmetic surgery for her younger child. The drive home felt different somehow, as if I were seeing our neighborhood through new eyes. The modest houses with their manicured lawns and basketball hoops suddenly looked fragile, temporary, like movie sets that could be dismantled at any moment. Our blue Colonial sat at the end of the street exactly as it always had, but now I could imagine federal agents walking up that front path. Imagine Mom being led away in handcuffs while neighbors watched from behind their curtains. The thought should have filled me with regret, but instead I felt only a hollow satisfaction, like finally setting down a weight I'd been carrying too long. Mom was in the living room when I entered, sitting on the couch with photo albums spread across the coffee table. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, her face brightening with desperate hope. "Emma, perfect timing! I was just looking through these old pictures. Remember when you won the state science fair? You were so proud, and I was so proud of you." She held up a photograph of 12-year-old me holding a trophy, grinning with braces and confidence. "We've always been a team, sweetheart. We've always figured things out together."
The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost insulting. Mom had arranged a shrine to our relationship, evidence of better times to guilt me into forgetting the present betrayal. But looking at that young girl in the photo, I felt only sadness for what she'd lost. Not just money, but the ability to trust the people who were supposed to protect her dreams. "Where's Jade?" I asked, setting my backpack by the door. "Upstairs on a video call with friends. Emma, we need to talk." Mom patted the couch beside her, but I remained standing. "I've been thinking all day about what you said, and you're right.
I handled this badly, but we can fix it. We can make a plan. What kind of plan? I kept my voice neutral, curious to see how she'd dig herself out of this hole. Well, I spoke to Mrs. Rodriguez today, from the bank. She said there might be options for personal loans, or I could take out a second mortgage on the house. It would take time, maybe a year or two, but I could get your money back. A year or two. She said it like it was nothing, like my entire future could be put on hold while she slowly scraped together restitution for her crime. As if Stanford would hold my acceptance letter indefinitely, as if scholarships came with extended warranties, as if dreams could be frozen and thawed without losing their shape. That's not good enough, I said. Mom's face fell. Emma, please. I know it's not ideal, but it's something. It's a start. It's too late. Something in my tone must have warned her, because her expression shifted from hope to fear in the space of a heartbeat. She stood slowly, photo albums sliding off her lap and scattering across the floor. What do you mean, too late? I met her eyes, these dark brown eyes that were so much like my own, and felt the moment stretch between us like a wire about to snap. I filed a complaint with the FBI this afternoon. The color drained from Mom's face so completely, I thought she might faint. She gripped the back of the couch for support, her knuckles white against the blue fabric. You... what? Bank fraud is a federal crime, Mom. Stealing $47,000 from your daughter's account, regardless of whether your name is on it, constitutes wire fraud and theft of federally insured funds. The legal terminology felt good in my mouth. Clean and precise and absolutely damning. Emma, my name came out as a whisper, broken and disbelieving. Emma, you didn't. Tell me you didn't actually. Case number IC 25843-922, I said, reciting the number I'd already memorized. I included bank records, transaction histories, and documentation showing that the money was specifically earmarked for educational expenses. I also provided evidence that the withdrawals were used for non-essential cosmetic procedures. Mom sank onto the couch like her strings had been cut. You reported your own mother to the FBI? I reported a crime to the appropriate authorities. I'm your mother. The words came out strangled, desperate. I raised you, I fed you, I loved you. And you stole from me. The interruption was sharp and final. Love doesn't justify theft, Mom. Being my mother doesn't give you the right to destroy my future. Footsteps thundered down the stairs, and Jade burst into the living room like an avenging angel, her perfect face flushed with rage. Are you insane? Are you actually insane? You called the FBI on Mom? I reported a federal crime, I said again, my voice steady despite the chaos erupting around me. She's our mother. Jade's voice cracked on the word, and for a moment she looked like the scared little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. She was trying to help me, trying to save me, and you want to send her to prison? I want justice. Justice? Jade laughed, high and bitter. This isn't justice, Emma. This is revenge. This is you being a vindictive bitch because you didn't get your way. The word hit me like a slap, not because it was particularly creative, but because of the venom behind it. Jade had never spoken to me like this, had never looked at me with such pure hatred. The sister who'd once followed me around like a shadow, who'd begged me to teach her how to braid friendship bracelets and solve algebra problems, was staring at me like I was a stranger, a dangerous stranger. Jade, stop, Mom said weakly. But there was no force behind it. No, I won't stop. Jade whirled on Mom, her fury expanding to encompass everyone in the room. This is your fault, too. You should have hidden it better. Should have made sure she never found out. The casual admission that deception had been the plan, not honesty, not family discussion, not respect for my dreams, just better lying. It crystallized everything wrong with our family dynamic, the assumption that my consent wasn't necessary for decisions about my life. "You think I should have just accepted it," I said, more a statement than a question. Yes, you should have accepted it. I needed this, Emma. I was dying inside, hating myself, barely eating, barely sleeping. The kids at school were cruel. They called me Beak and Bird Girl and made honking sounds when I walked past. I was planning to hurt myself, Emma. Actually, I hurt myself. The words hung in the air like a threat, like an ultimatum dressed up as confession. She was using her pain as a weapon, trying to make me responsible for her mental health, trying to guilt me into accepting theft as therapy. "So, you decided my mental health didn't matter?" I asked quietly. "What mental health?" Jade's laugh was cruel. "You're fine, Emma. You're perfect. You get good grades, you have friends, you're going to college anyway. With what money? How exactly am I going to college now, Jade? With fairy dust and good intentions? Financial aid, scholarships, loans." She threw the words at me like solutions she'd just invented. "Normal people figure it out without having mommy and daddy's money handed to them. That was my money." I was shouting now, all my careful control finally breaking. "I earned every dollar of it. Birthday money from grandma, wages from tutoring jobs, prize money from science fairs. I saved it for 18 years while you spent every penny you got on clothes and makeup and music festival tickets. So that makes you better than me?" Jade stepped closer, her face twisted with years of accumulated resentment. "That makes you more deserving? It makes it mine." "Girls, stop!" Mom tried to insert herself between us, but we barely noticed her. "This isn't helping anyone." "You want to know what's not helping?" Jade's voice dropped to a whisper that was somehow more frightening than her screaming. "Having a sister who would rather see her family destroyed than share what she has. Having a sister who cares more about money than about the people she's supposed to love."
The accusation hit harder than I'd expected. Not because it was true, but because it contained just enough twisted logic to make me doubt myself for a moment. Was I being selfish? Was I prioritizing money over family? Was justice really worth the destruction I was about to unleash? But then I remembered the bank balance, the casual way they'd restructured my entire future, the complete lack of remorse or even consultation. This wasn't about sharing. This was about theft. This wasn't about family. This was about consequence. "I do love you," I said, and meant it, despite everything. But love doesn't mean accepting abuse. It doesn't mean letting you steal from me without consequence. "Abuse?" Mom's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Emma, providing for your sister when she was in crisis isn't abuse. Stealing my college fund is absolutely abuse." I turned to face her, this woman who taught me to ride a bike and helped with homework and was now acting like grand theft was a parenting decision. "Financial abuse is still abuse, Mom. Taking my money without permission, lying about it, trying to manipulate me into accepting it, that's textbook abusive behavior." "Don't you dare," Mom said, standing up with sudden fury. "Don't you dare throw around words like that. I have never abused you, Emma. I have sacrificed everything for you girls. You sacrificed my future for Jade's vanity." "It wasn't vanity." Mom's voice broke on the word. "She was genuinely suffering, genuinely in pain. As her mother, I couldn't stand by and watch her destroy herself. So you decided to destroy me instead?" The words fell between us like a gauntlet, a line drawn in the sand that couldn't be uncrossed. Mom stared at me with tears streaming down her face. And for a moment, I saw not the thief who'd stolen my dreams, but the tired single mother who'd worked double shifts to keep us fed after Dad left, who attended every school play and science fair and graduation ceremony with fierce pride.
But that woman and this thief were the same person, and good intentions didn't erase bad actions. Love didn't justify theft. Desperation didn't make crime acceptable. Emma, if you go through with this, if you let the FBI investigate, you'll destroy this family. Not just me, all of us. Jade will lose her mother, you'll lose yours. And for what? Money that's already spent? For justice. For consequences, for the principle that actions matter and theft is theft, and family doesn't give you the right to steal people's dreams. Dreams? Jade's voice was acid. Your precious dreams about going to some fancy school and becoming some hotshot scientist? Newsflash, Emma, most people manage to have successful careers without mommy and daddy paying their way through Stanford. Most people don't have parents who steal their college funds. Most people don't have parents who love them enough to sacrifice everything for their happiness. Mom risked everything to help me. And instead of being grateful to have a mother who cares that much, you're trying to send her to prison? The twisted logic was breathtaking. In Jade's version of events, I was the villain for wanting my stolen money back. Mom was the hero for committing fraud. And the real crime was my lack of gratitude for being robbed by someone who claimed to love me. I'm not grateful for theft, I said simply. Then maybe you should find somewhere else to live, Jade said, her voice cold and final. Since you hate this family so much, since you think we're all criminals, maybe you should leave. The suggestion hung in the air like a dare. Mom gasped and started to protest, but Jade held up her hand to silence her. No, I'm serious. Emma wants to play hardball, wants to involve federal agents and destroy our family, then she can do it from somewhere else. She can see how much her precious integrity matters when she's sleeping in her car.
Jade, that's enough, Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Jade's eyes never left mine. She just filed a federal complaint against you, Mom. She's trying to send you to prison, trying to destroy our home, trying to tear apart everything we have left. And you want her to stay for dinner and pretend we're still a happy family? The silence stretched between us, thick with years of unspoken resentments and competing loyalties. I could feel the moment crystallizing, the family fracturing along lines that had been building for years. Mom and Jade believed family loyalty trumped everything else. I stood alone with my evidence and my belief that actions should have consequences. Fine, I said, the word coming out steadier than I felt. I'll pack a bag. Mom's face crumpled. Emma, no. Jade didn't mean it. Yes, she did. I looked at my sister, this stranger with my father's eyes and a face bought with my future. And she's right. If you think I'm the criminal here, if you think wanting my stolen money back makes me the bad guy, then there's no point in staying. I headed for the stairs, but Jade's voice stopped me. Where will you go? There was something in her tone, not quite concern, but maybe curiosity about whether I'd actually follow through. Maya's house. Her parents have always said I was welcome there. Maya's parents don't know what you've done, Jade said. Wait until they find out you're the kind of person who destroys her own family over money. See how welcome you feel then. The cruelty in her words was breathtaking, but it also revealed something important. Jade was scared. Scared that I wouldn't back down, scared that consequences were actually coming, scared that her perfect new face might not be worth 30 years of her mother's life. Good. She should be scared. I climbed the stairs to my room and pulled my old camping backpack from the closet, the same one I'd used for summer science camps and school trips. It felt surreal to be packing it with clothes and toiletries and textbooks, preparing to leave the only home I'd ever known because I'd refused to accept being robbed by my own family. But it also felt right, clean, like finally taking action after months of watching my dreams get trampled by people who claimed to love me. I was folding my Stanford acceptance letter, the one I might never be able to use now, when I heard voices from downstairs. Mom and Jade arguing in urgent whispers, their conversation too muffled to make out words, but clear in its desperate tone.
Planning damage control, probably. Figuring out how to spin the story when neighbors started asking questions, when federal agents started knocking on doors, when the fantasy of their perfect family finally collided with the reality of their choices. My phone buzzed. A text from Maya. "Still want to hang out tonight? Mom's making her famous lasagna and Dad got that documentary about marine biology you wanted to see." The normalcy of it, the casual assumption that I was just another teenager with typical teenage problems, almost broke me. Maya's house represented everything I was losing. Stability, unconditional support, parents who actually protected their children's dreams instead of stealing them. "Actually, I might need to stay over tonight, if that's okay," I texted back. "Family drama." "Of course! Want to talk about it?" I stared at the question for a long moment. How could I possibly explain that I'd just reported my mother to the FBI? That I was being kicked out of my house for refusing to accept being robbed by my own family? That my family had chosen sides and I was standing alone on the wrong one? "Tomorrow," I typed. "It's complicated." I finished packing and slung the backpack over my shoulder, taking one last look around the room that had been mine for 18 years. The bulletin board covered with acceptance letters and scholarship notifications. The desk where I'd spent countless hours studying for the SATs and writing application essays. The window where I used to sit and plan my future while watching seasons change in our backyard. All of it felt like archaeological evidence of a different person's life, someone who'd trusted her family and believed in happy endings, and thought that working hard and following rules would be enough to protect her dreams. That girl was gone now, replaced by someone harder, colder, more realistic about the gap between what people said they valued and what they actually did when tested. I walked downstairs to find Mom and Jade waiting in the living room, their faces masks of barely controlled emotion. Mom had been crying, her eyes were red and swollen, but Jade looked defiant, chin raised like she was daring me to back down. "Emma, please," Mom said one last time. "We can work this out. We can fix this." "No," I said, adjusting the straps on my backpack. "We can't." "You're really going to do this?" Jade's voice was steady, but I could see the fear lurking beneath her anger. "You're really going to destroy our family?" "I'm not destroying anything," I said, meeting her eyes. "I'm just refusing to pretend that theft is love." I walked toward the door, each step echoing in the sudden silence. Behind me, I could hear Mom crying softly and Jade whispering harsh comfort, but I didn't turn around. This was the path they'd chosen when they decided my dreams were expendable, when they chose immediate gratification over long-term consequence, when they prioritized Jade's insecurity over my carefully planned future. The rain had stopped, leaving the evening air crisp and clean, washed free of dust and pretense. I put my bag in the trunk of my car and sat behind the wheel for a moment, looking back at the house where I'd grown up. Light spilled from the living room windows, warm and golden and deceptively peaceful. Inside that light, my mother and sister were probably planning their defense, crafting the narrative they'd tell when people started asking questions. I could imagine them casting me as the ungrateful daughter, the vindictive child who chose money over family, the cold calculator who destroyed love for the sake of principle. But I knew the truth. I knew that sometimes love wasn't enough, that good intentions didn't erase bad actions, that family loyalty couldn't justify theft. I knew that consequences mattered, that actions had to have meaning, that dreams deserved protection even from the people who claim to care about you most. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb
watching my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror. Somewhere in a federal office, agents were reading my complaint, beginning an investigation that would unravel my family's carefully constructed normalcy thread by thread. There was no going back now. No compromise, no middle ground, no gentle solution that preserved everyone's dignity. There was only justice, harsh and absolute and utterly necessary. And for the first time in weeks, that felt like enough. The call came 3 weeks later on a Thursday morning, while I was sitting in Maya's kitchen, mechanically eating cereal and pretending to care about the calculus homework spread across the table. Maya's mom, Dr. Sarah Martinez, was bustling around making coffee and packing lunches with the efficient warmth that had become my lifeline since leaving home. She'd accepted my presence without question, setting up the guest room like I was a long-term exchange student rather than a refugee from my own family. "Emma, your phone's ringing," Maya called from upstairs, where she was getting ready for school.
I glanced at the screen. Unknown number with a Cleveland area code. My heart jumped into my throat as I recognized the pattern I'd been unconsciously waiting for. The FBI field office calling about case IC 258473992. Hello? Is this Emma Chen? The voice was professional, female, carrying the weight of federal authority. Yes, this is Emma. This is Special Agent Rebecca Torres with the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. I'm calling regarding the complaint you filed 3 weeks ago. We'd like to schedule an interview to discuss the details of your case. The words I'd been both dreading and longing to hear finally materialized, making everything suddenly terrifyingly real. For 3 weeks, I'd lived in limbo, going to school, staying at Maya's house, avoiding my family's increasingly desperate attempts at contact, while wondering if federal agents were actually investigating or if my complaint had disappeared into some bureaucratic void. Of course, I managed, my voice steadier than my hands. When would be convenient? How about this afternoon, say 4 o'clock at our Cleveland field office? You're 18, correct? So you can come in without a parent or guardian? The irony wasn't lost on me. My legal adulthood meant I could meet with federal agents about my mother's crimes without needing her permission. Yes, I'm 18. 4 o'clock works. Excellent. Bring any additional documentation you might have, bank records, correspondence, anything that supports your complaint. And Emma, Agent Torres's voice softened slightly, I know this must be difficult. Family financial crimes are always complex, but we take them very seriously. After hanging up, I sat staring at my phone while Dr. Martinez moved around the kitchen, her presence both comforting and foreign. She was everything my mother wasn't. Stable, supportive, someone who actually protected her children instead of stealing from them. Maya had inherited her mother's dark hair and infectious laugh, but more importantly, she'd inherited the security of knowing her parents would never betray her fundamental trust. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Dr. Martinez asked, noticing my expression. "That was the FBI," I said, the words feeling surreal even as I spoke them. "They want to interview me this afternoon." Her face went through a series of micro-expressions, surprise, concern, something that might have been pride. "That's good, right? That means they're taking your case seriously." I nodded, though good felt like an inadequate word for the mixture of vindication and terror coursing through my veins. For 3 weeks, I'd second-guessed my decision daily, wondering if I'd overreacted, if I was being vindictive, if there might have been some other way to handle things. But Agent Torres's call confirmed that federal law enforcement agreed with my assessment. What Mom had done was serious enough to warrant investigation. Maya bounded into the kitchen, backpack slung over her shoulder, chattering about some drama from her AP biology class. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw my face. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "The FBI wants to interview me today." Maya's eyes widened. She still didn't know the full story. I'd told her that Mom had taken money from my college fund, without permission, framing it as a family financial dispute rather than federal fraud. The truth felt too enormous, too destructive to share even with my best friend. "Wow," Maya said finally. "Do you want me to come with you for moral support?"
The offer was so typically Maya. Loyal, protective, ready to stand by me even when she didn't fully understand what she was supporting. It made my chest tight with gratitude and grief for the family solidarity I'd lost. "Thanks, but I think I need to do this alone," I said. The FBI field office was an imposing glass and steel monument to federal authority, all clean lines and tinted windows that reflected the gray October sky. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes, gathering courage while watching agents and staff members walk purposefully through the lobby. They looked exactly like what central casting would order for FBI agents. Crisp suits, serious expressions, the kind of people who investigated white-collar crime and domestic terrorism and other threats to the American way of life. Soon, I would be sitting across from them, explaining how my mother had systematically stolen my future, how my sister had benefited from that theft, how my family had fractured along lines of loyalty and justice. The weight of it felt enormous, like holding up the sky. The security checkpoint was thorough but professional. I surrendered my phone and backpack, walked through metal detectors, and submitted to the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for courthouses and airports. A young agent escorted me to a conference room on the 4th floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of downtown Cleveland. Agent Torres was not what I'd expected. She was younger than my mother, maybe early 40s, with short auburn hair and intelligent brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a navy blazer and white blouse, professional but not intimidating, and when she shook my hand, her grip was firm without being aggressive. "Thank you for coming in, Emma. I know this can't be easy." She gestured to a chair across from her at a polished conference table. "Before we begin, I want you to understand that this is a voluntary interview. You're not under investigation. You're the victim here. You can stop at any time, ask for breaks, whatever you need." The word victim hit me unexpectedly hard. For 3 weeks, I'd been cast as the villain by my family, the ungrateful daughter, the vindictive sister, the destroyer of family harmony. Hearing a federal agent casually refer to me as the victim felt like validation I hadn't realized I desperately needed. "I understand," I said. Agent Torres opened a manila folder thick with documents. I recognized bank statements, transaction records, even printouts of my original FBI complaint. The bureaucratic efficiency was somehow comforting. Proof that my case was being taken seriously, that consequences were actually possible in a world that had felt increasingly unmoored from justice. "Let's start with the basics," Agent Torres said, clicking open a pen. "Tell me about your relationship with the account in question. When was it opened? Who had access? What was its intended purpose?" I walked her through the history. How Mom had helped me open the account at 13, how every birthday check and summer job paycheck had gone into it, how the balance had grown from hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands over the years, how I'd checked it obsessively, planning college expenses down to the dollar, researching tuition costs and meal plans and textbook budgets with the methodical precision that had become my signature. "And your mother had legitimate access to this account?" "Yes, she was listed as a joint account holder because I was a minor when we opened it, but the understanding was always that it was my money for my education. She never contributed to it financially. Every deposit came from me." "Did she ever discuss using the money for other purposes?" "Never, not once in 5 years. The certainty in my voice surprised me. She knew how important college was to me. She helped me research schools, edit application essays, prepare for interviews. She knew that money was my entire future." Agent Torres made notes in neat, precise handwriting. "Tell me about the withdrawals. When did you first become aware that money was missing?" I recounted that terrible Tuesday afternoon, the bank notification that had shattered my world, the desperate hope that it was somehow a mistake. Agent Torres listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making additional notes.
And when you confronted your mother about the missing funds, what was her response?
She said it was for my sister's cosmetic surgery, that Jade was depressed about her appearance, that she was being bullied at school, that she'd mentioned self-harm.
Mom called it a loan, said she'd pay it back, but when I pressed her for details, she admitted the money was completely gone. Did she express remorse? Acknowledge that she should have asked permission? I thought about that kitchen confrontation, Mom's desperate attempts to justify the theft, her immediate pivot to guilt and manipulation. No. She kept saying I was being unreasonable, that family takes care of family, that I should understand why Jade needed help. She never actually apologized for taking the money without permission. Agent Torres leaned back in her chair, studying me with the kind of intensity that made me feel like she was reading between the lines of everything I said. Emma, I have to ask, and please understand this isn't a judgment, but why didn't you try to resolve this within the family? Most people would attempt mediation, family counseling, something before involving federal law enforcement. The question I'd been dreading, the one that made me feel like I had to justify choosing justice over family loyalty. But sitting in this conference room, surrounded by evidence of my mother's crimes, the answer felt clearer than it had in weeks. Because theft is theft, I said simply, because $47,000 isn't a family squabble, it's grand larceny. Because if anyone else had stolen that money, everyone would agree they should face consequences. The fact that my mother gave birth to me doesn't give her the right to destroy my future. Agent Torres nodded slowly. Tell me about your college plans. How has this affected your ability to pursue higher education? The question opened a wound I'd been trying to ignore for 3 weeks. I explained about Stanford, about the merit scholarships that required specific enrollment timelines, about the careful calculations I'd made based on having that $47,000 as backup funding. How without it, my acceptance letter had become worthless paper, my dreams deferred indefinitely. I've been looking into community college as a backup, but the programs I want aren't available locally, and I'd lose the scholarship opportunities I spent 4 years earning. It's not just about the money, it's about the trajectory of my entire life being altered without my consent. And your sister received cosmetic surgery with these funds? Rhinoplasty. $47,000 for a nose job because she didn't like how she looked. The summary sounded even more absurd spoken aloud to a federal agent. She's 18, healthy, and has no medical need for the procedure. It was purely cosmetic, purely elective. Agent Torres was quiet for a moment, making notes. Emma, I have to ask, and please understand this isn't a judgment, but why didn't you try to resolve this within the family? Most people would attempt mediation, family counseling, something before involving federal law enforcement. They kicked me out. Well, my sister did. She said if I was going to destroy the family, I should do it from somewhere else. And where are you staying now? With my best friend's family, the Martinezes. They've been incredibly supportive. I thought of Dr. Martinez's quiet acceptance, her husband's gentle questions about school, Maya's fierce loyalty despite not knowing the full story. They're everything my family should have been. Agent Torres closed her folder and leaned forward slightly. Emma, I want you to understand what happens next. Based on your complaint and the documentation you've provided, we're opening a formal investigation into potential violations of federal banking fraud statutes. This means we'll be interviewing your mother, examining financial records, potentially involving other agencies. My heart started pounding. What does that mean for her, for my family? If we find evidence of criminal behavior, and based on what you've told me, that seems likely, we'll recommend charges to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Bank fraud involving amounts over $50,000 typically results in federal prosecution. She paused, studying my face. Are you prepared for that possibility? The question hung in the air like a sword. Was I prepared for my mother to face federal charges? For our family to be torn apart in a public, legal spectacle? For neighbors and classmates and college admissions officers to know that my mother was a federal criminal? She made her choice when she stole from me. I'm just making sure there are consequences.
Agent Torres nodded approvingly. One more thing, Emma. Your mother or her attorney may try to contact you, may pressure you to recant your statement or refuse to cooperate with our investigation. You need to know that you have the right to refuse any contact and that attempting to intimidate a federal witness is itself a felony. The thought hadn't occurred to me, but now it seemed obvious. Of course Mom would try to pressure me into backing down. Of course she'd recruit flying monkeys, family friends, relatives, maybe even my grandparents, to guilt me into destroying my own case. What should I do if that happens? Document everything. Save voicemails, text messages, any written communication, and call me immediately. Agent Torres handed me a business card with her direct number. We take witness intimidation very seriously. As we walked toward the elevator, Agent Torres stopped and turned to face me. Emma, I've been investigating financial crimes for 12 years, and I want you to know something. What you did, reporting this, following through despite family pressure, took enormous courage. Most people in your situation would have suffered in silence, would have accepted the theft rather than face the consequences of seeking justice. The validation hit me like a wave, washing away weeks of self-doubt and family-induced guilt. A federal agent, someone who investigated crimes for a living, thought I'd done the right thing, thought I was brave rather than vindictive, principled rather than destructive. Thank you, I managed. Don't thank me yet. This process is going to get harder before it gets easier. Your family will likely escalate their pressure tactics, and the investigation itself will be stressful. But I want you to remember that you didn't cause this situation. You're just refusing to enable it. The drive back to Maya's house passed in a fog of competing emotions. Relief that the investigation was moving forward, terror about what came next, a strange sense of completion that felt like justice taking its first real breath. I'd crossed a line this afternoon, moved from victim to witness, from family member to federal informant. There was no going back now, but for the first time since that bank notification 3 weeks ago, going back felt like the wrong direction anyway. If you're invested in Emma's journey toward justice, this story shows how difficult but necessary it can be to stand up for what's right, even when it costs everything. If this resonates with you, please take a moment to like and share this story. Your support helps important stories like Emma's reach others who might be facing similar impossible choices. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true stories. Maya was waiting in the driveway when I pulled up, bouncing on her toes with barely contained curiosity. How did it go? Was it scary? Did they ask hard questions? It was... I searched for words that wouldn't reveal too much while still honoring her concern. Professional. They're taking it seriously. Good, Maya said fiercely. Your mom had no right to take your money no matter what family drama was happening. If only she knew the half of it. If only any of them knew that family drama was actually federal fraud, that my mother wasn't just thoughtless, but criminal, that I wasn't just seeking restitution, but justice. Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway, her medical training evident in the way she assessed my emotional state with a single glance. How are you holding up, Emma? I'm okay, I said, and surprised myself by meaning it. I think I'm exactly where I need to be.
That night, I lay in Maya's guest room staring at the ceiling while the house settled around me. Tomorrow, federal agents would begin investigating my mother's crimes. Soon, there would be subpoenas and interviews and possibly criminal charges. My family would probably hate me even more than they already did, and our neighborhood would buzz with whispered speculation about the Chen family's spectacular implosion. But tonight, for the first time since discovering my empty bank account, I felt something approaching peace. Not happiness, this was too devastating for happiness, but a quiet certainty that I'd chosen the right path, that consequences mattered, that justice was worth the price I was paying. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Emma, this is your Aunt Linda. I heard what happened with your mother, and I want you to know that some of us understand why you did what you did. What she took from you was wrong, no matter her reasons. Stay strong, sweetheart. I stared at the message in shock.
Aunt Linda was Mom's older sister, someone I'd barely spoken to since Dad left. The fact that news of my FBI complaint had already reached the extended family was terrifying, but her support felt like a lifeline I hadn't known I needed. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. Maybe there were other people who understood the difference between love and enabling, between family loyalty and accepting abuse, between forgiveness and justice. Maybe I wasn't the villain in this story after all. I set the phone aside and closed my eyes, letting Agent Torres's words echo in my mind. You didn't cause this situation, you're just refusing to enable it. For the first time in weeks, I fell asleep without crying. The indictment came down on a bitter February morning, 6 months after I'd walked into that FBI field office and set the wheels of justice in motion. I was sitting in my constitutional law class at Cleveland State University, the compromise school I'd chosen when Stanford became financially impossible, when my phone buzzed with a text from Agent Torres. The grand jury returned indictments this morning. 3 counts wire fraud, 2 counts theft from a federally insured institution. Arraignment scheduled for March 3rd. Call me when you can. My hands trembled as I read the message, the words blurring as classmates around me debated the Fourth Amendment implications of digital surveillance. The professor's voice faded to background noise as the reality hit me. My mother was now a federal defendant, facing charges that could send her to prison for decades. I'd wanted this, I'd fought for it, sacrificed my family relationships for it, spent months providing evidence and testimony to make it happen. But seeing it in black and white, the formal legal language that transformed Patricia Chen from my flawed, desperate mother into a federal criminal, felt like watching a controlled demolition from the inside. After class, I found a quiet corner of the library and called Agent Torres back. Her voice carried the professional satisfaction of a case well built, but she was careful to keep her tone neutral when discussing what came next. The U.S. Attorney's Office is confident in the charges. Your mother's attorney will likely push for a plea agreement, but that depends on her willingness to accept responsibility. Either way, you should prepare yourself for the possibility of testifying at trial. Testifying. Standing in a federal courtroom, raising my right hand, swearing to tell the truth about how my own mother had stolen my future? The thought made my stomach clench with anxiety and anticipation in equal measure. What kind of sentence is she looking at? I asked. If convicted on all counts, anywhere from 8 to 15 years, depending on her criminal history and cooperation. But, Emma, these are federal guidelines. Judges have discretion, and family circumstances sometimes influence sentencing. 8 to 15 years. I tried to imagine my mother, now 52 years old, emerging from federal prison as a woman approaching 70. Tried to picture Jade visiting her behind reinforced glass, talking through phones about a world that had moved on without them. The images felt both satisfying and devastating. Justice and tragedy intertwined like lovers in a photograph.
The news broke in the local media 2 days later. Suburban mother indicted for stealing daughter's college fund, read the headline in the Cleveland Plain Dealer, accompanied by mom's booking photo, a grainy image that made her look older, smaller, diminished by the weight of federal charges. The article was factual, but stark, laying out the charges without editorial commentary. But the comments section below was a different story entirely. A battlefield of moral outrage where strangers debated whether I was a hero or a villain for destroying my family in pursuit of justice. Good for the daughter for standing up for herself, wrote user Cleveland Mom 47. Parents aren't supposed to steal from their children. This is heartbreaking, responded Family First 2019. Sometimes families make desperate choices. Sending someone's mother to prison over money is just cruel. I read every comment, absorbing the praise and criticism like physical blows. The supporters saw what I'd always believed, that theft was theft, that family relationships didn't excuse criminal behavior, that parents had obligations to protect rather than exploit their children. The critics saw what my family had always argued, that blood was thicker than legal principle, that love should triumph over justice,
that I was destroying lives over something as trivial as money. But $47,000 wasn't trivial. Stanford wasn't trivial. 18 years of careful planning and sacrificing wasn't trivial. The systematic erosion of trust between a mother and daughter wasn't trivial. Maya found me in the library that afternoon, laptop open to the news article, reading the comments with the compulsive attention usually reserved for car accidents and natural disasters. "Emma, stop," she said, closing the laptop with gentle force. "Reading that stuff will make you crazy. People think I'm a monster. Half these comments say I'm vindictive and heartless for reporting my own mother. And the other half think you're brave for refusing to be victimized by family." Maya sat down across from me, her expression serious in a way that reminded me of her mother. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're the same person you've always been, someone who believes actions should have consequences, who refuses to accept injustice even when it's easier. That's not monstrous, Emma. That's integrity." The word integrity hung between us like a gift I wasn't sure I deserved. For 8 months, I'd been questioning my own motivations, wondering if I was seeking justice or revenge, if I was protecting my future or punishing my family. But Maya's calm certainty helped crystallize something I'd been struggling to articulate. I hadn't changed. The situation had revealed who I'd always been. 2 weeks later, I received a call I'd been dreading since the indictment. Mom's voice on my phone, smaller and more fragile than I remembered, asking if we could meet, to talk. Her attorney had apparently advised against contact with me, but she'd called anyway, desperate to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. "Please, Emma," she whispered. "Just coffee. Just 20 minutes. I need to see you." Against every instinct in Agent Torres's explicit warnings about witness intimidation, I agreed. The coffee shop she chose was neutral territory, a chain restaurant halfway between her house and Cleveland State, public enough to discourage dramatic confrontations. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth wearing a gray sweater that made her look older than her 52 years. The confident, bustling mother who'd ruled our kitchen had been replaced by someone smaller, uncertain, worn down by months of legal proceedings and social exile.
"You look good," she said as I slid into the booth across from her. "College suits you." The small talk felt surreal given the circumstances. My federal case against her was proceeding toward trial, and she wanted to discuss how college was treating me. But I played along, updating her on my classes, my part-time job at the campus library, my slow adjustment to a future that looked nothing like the one I'd planned. "I'm proud of you," Mom said finally. "I know I have no right to say that anymore, but I am. You're strong, stronger than I ever was." "Strong enough to survive having my college fund stolen," I said quietly. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "Emma, I need you to understand something. What I did, taking that money, it wasn't about not loving you. It was about loving Jade too much, about being so terrified of losing her that I made the worst possible choice. You didn't just make a bad choice, Mom. You committed multiple felonies." "I know," her voice broke on the words. "I know what I did was wrong, legally and morally and every other way. But I need you to know it wasn't personal. It wasn't about thinking your dreams mattered less than Jade's pain." The explanation felt like too little too late, but I could see she needed to say it, needed to believe that her motives had been pure even if her actions were criminal. "Mom, do you remember what you said to me when I was 7 and broke Mrs. Peterson's window with my baseball?" I asked. She looked confused by the apparent non sequitur. "No, not exactly. You said that good intentions don't fix broken windows, that I had to take responsibility for what I'd done, apologize to Mrs. Peterson, and pay for the damage with my allowance money." I kept my voice gentle but firm.
You taught me that actions have consequences regardless of motivation. You taught me that being sorry isn't enough if you don't try to make things right. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I can't make this right, Emma. The money's gone. I can't give you back your dreams. You could have tried. You could have taken out a loan, mortgaged the house, found some way to pay me back instead of calling it a loan you never intended to honor. You could have shown some accountability instead of expecting me to just accept being robbed. I was scared, she whispered. Scared of losing the house, scared of bankruptcy, scared of admitting to everyone that I'd made such a terrible mistake. So you decided I should lose my future instead? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer, because we both knew that was exactly what had happened. In the moment of crisis, faced with a choice between her comfort and my dreams, she'd chosen herself. The rest, the justifications about Jade's mental health, the claims about family loyalty, the anger at my pursuit of justice, was just window dressing on a fundamentally selfish decision. What happens now? She asked finally. Your attorney hasn't told you? He's told me about plea agreements and sentencing guidelines and federal prison terms, but I mean between us, between our family. I studied her face, this woman who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped with homework and systematically destroyed my trust. She looked genuinely confused by the question, as if our relationship could somehow survive her criminal betrayal of my future. There is no us anymore, Mom. There's no family. You made that choice when you stole from me. Emma, please. No. I stood up, gathering my purse and jacket. You want to know what happens now? You face the consequences of your choices. You go to trial, or you take a plea deal, or you spend the next decade in federal prison. But you don't get to pretend we're still family. You don't get to steal my future and then ask for forgiveness like it was some minor disagreement. I walked away without looking back, her broken voice calling my name across the coffee shop. Other patrons stared as I pushed through the door into the cold February air, but I didn't care. I'd said what needed to be said, drawn the lines that should have been obvious from the beginning. The trial never happened. 3 weeks after our coffee shop confrontation, Mom's attorney negotiated a plea agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office. She would plead guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud in exchange for the other charges being dropped, accept a sentence of 5 years in federal prison, and pay restitution in the amount of $47,000 plus interest.
Agent Torres called to walk me through the details. The restitution is structured as a payment plan, she explained. Your mother will have to liquidate assets, probably including the family home, to make an initial payment, then continue payments from prison and after release until the full amount is satisfied. The house where I'd grown up would be sold to pay me back for the money Mom had stolen. The irony was complete. Jade would lose her childhood home because Mom had prioritized her cosmetic surgery over my college fund. The ripple effects of that original theft were finally reaching everyone who'd benefited from it. What about the prison sentence? I asked. She'll likely serve about 3.5 years with good behavior. Federal sentences don't allow for early parole, but there are programs for nonviolent offenders. 3.5 years. It felt simultaneously like too much and not enough. Too much time for a desperate mother, not enough time for someone who's stolen my entire future. But it was justice, measured and appropriate, and completely necessary. The sentencing hearing was held on a rainy Thursday in April. I sat in the back of the federal courtroom watching Mom stand before Judge Patricia Walsh in an orange jumpsuit, her hands shackled as she formally pleaded guilty to destroying her daughter's future. Jade was there too, sitting with our Aunt Linda and a few family friends. She looked diminished somehow, her perfect nose overshadowed by dark circles under her eyes and a general air of defeat. The cosmetic surgery that had cost us everything had given her temporary confidence, but the price was becoming clear. Her mother in federal prison, her family scattered, her childhood home sold to pay restitution to the sister she'd helped betray.
When Judge Walsh asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement, I stood and walked to the podium with steady steps. The courtroom was silent except for the rain against tall windows and the soft scratch of the court reporter's fingers on her machine. Your Honor, I began, 8 months ago, I discovered that my mother had stolen $47,000 from my college fund to pay for my sister's cosmetic surgery. This wasn't a moment of desperation or a family emergency. It was a systematic theft carried out over several weeks while she looked me in the eye and pretended to support my educational dreams. I paused, looking directly at Mom, who couldn't meet my gaze. The defendant didn't just steal money. She stole my ability to attend Stanford University, my merit-based scholarships, my carefully planned future. She stole my trust in family, my belief that parents protect their children instead of exploiting them. My voice grew stronger as I continued. I'm here today not because I wanted revenge, but because I believe actions must have consequences. Because theft is theft regardless of family relationships. Because love doesn't justify crime, and good intentions don't erase the damage caused by bad actions. Judge Walsh nodded thoughtfully. Thank you, Ms. Chen. Your courage in reporting this crime and seeing it through to prosecution is commendable. When Mom was finally sentenced, 5 years in federal prison, 3 years supervised release, and full restitution, I felt a complicated mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but at the cost of everything I'd once called family. I left the courthouse alone, walking through downtown Cleveland in the spring rain. My phone buzzed with messages from Maya, from Dr. Martinez, from Aunt Linda offering support and congratulations. But the most important message came from myself. I had stood up for my principles, refused to accept injustice, and seen it through to its logical conclusion.
The questions followed me through AP English, through calculus, through lunch where I pushed food around my plate while Maya chattered about college applications and weekend plans. Normal teenage concerns that felt as foreign to me as speaking another language. During study hall, I slipped away to the computer lab and pulled up the FBI's reporting website again. The forms looked different in daylight, less like instruments of justice and more like weapons of mass destruction. Filling them out would be easy. I had all the information, all the evidence, all the legal justification I needed. But it would also be irreversible. Once I submitted that report, once federal agents started investigating, there would be no taking it back. No family meetings, no compromises, no gentle solutions that preserved everyone's dignity. There would only be justice, clean and absolute, and utterly destructive. I started typing, my fingers moving across the keyboard like they belonged to someone else. Name, address, relationship to suspect, description of the crime. The words looked stark against the white screen, official and final and terrifying. But they also looked like hope, like consequences, like a future where actions mattered and dreams couldn't be stolen without price. I was halfway through the report when the bell rang, jolting me back to the present. My classmates gathered their books and headed to their next classes, but I remained frozen at the computer lab, cursor blinking in the description field, like a heartbeat. One more paragraph, and it would be done. One more paragraph, and there would be no going back. My finger hovered over the submit button as the computer lab emptied around me, leaving me alone with my decision and its terrible, necessary consequences. I hit submit at 3:42 p.m. on a Wednesday, sitting in my car in the school parking lot while rain drummed against the windshield like accusations. The FBI complaint confirmation appeared on my phone screen, case number IC 25847392, and with it the point of no return crystallized in my chest, like ice forming over a pond. There was a strange peace in having made the choice, a terrible clarity that came with burning bridges behind you. The report was filed, the wheels of federal justice set in motion, and somewhere in a field office 45 minutes away, agents would soon be reading about how Patricia Chen of 1247 Maple Street had systematically stolen $47,000 from her daughter's college fund to finance cosmetic surgery for her younger child. The drive home felt different somehow, as if I were seeing our neighborhood through new eyes. The modest houses with their manicured lawns and basketball hoops suddenly looked fragile, temporary, like movie sets that could be dismantled at any moment. Our blue Colonial sat at the end of the street exactly as it always had, but now I could imagine federal agents walking up that front path. Imagine Mom being led away in handcuffs while neighbors watched from behind their curtains. The thought should have filled me with regret, but instead I felt only a hollow satisfaction, like finally setting down a weight I'd been carrying too long. Mom was in the living room when I entered, sitting on the couch with photo albums spread across the coffee table. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, her face brightening with desperate hope. "Emma, perfect timing! I was just looking through these old pictures. Remember when you won the state science fair? You were so proud, and I was so proud of you." She held up a photograph of 12-year-old me holding a trophy, grinning with braces and confidence. "We've always been a team, sweetheart. We've always figured things out together."
In the audience, I spotted Agent Torres, now a supervisory special agent in the Chicago field office. She'd been instrumental in connecting me with researchers studying family financial crimes, and her mentorship had shaped both my academic focus and my advocacy work. Next to her sat Dr. Martinez, who had flown in from Cleveland to see my presentation. Maya's mother had become a second parent to me in ways that transcended housing and homework help. She'd shown me what unconditional support actually looked like. "The statistics are staggering," I said, clicking to a slide filled with data I'd spent months compiling. Family financial abuse affects an estimated 12.3 million Americans annually, with theft amounts averaging $23,000 per incident. But prosecution rates remain below 3%, largely because victims struggle with the psychological barrier of reporting their own family members. The numbers represented more than academic research. They represented countless stories like mine, countless families where love had been weaponized to justify theft, where victims had been gaslit into believing that seeking justice made them the real criminals. After the presentation, I was approached by a young woman who looked barely 20, her professional suit hanging slightly loose on her small frame. She introduced herself as Sarah Kim, a recent college graduate whose stepfather had drained her education savings to cover his gambling debts. "I've been thinking about reporting him for months," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But my mother says it would destroy our family. She says if I really loved them, I'd find another way to pay for graduate school." The familiar phrases hit me like echoes from my own past. The demand for sacrifice disguised as love, the assumption that the victim should bear the cost of the perpetrator's choices, the emotional manipulation designed to protect criminals from the consequences of their actions. "Sarah," I said, guiding her to a quieter corner of the reception area, "can I ask you something? If a stranger had stolen your education savings, would you report it to police?" She said immediately, "Of course." "So why should family members be held to a lower standard than strangers? Why should the people who are supposed to love you most be allowed to hurt you worst?" I watched the familiar light bulb moment cross her face, the recognition that she wasn't being asked to choose between love and justice, but between enabling abuse and protecting herself. We talked for another 20 minutes, and I gave her Agent Torres's contact information, along with resources for young adults navigating family financial crimes. Later that evening, I sat in my small but comfortable apartment near the University of Chicago campus, working on the final chapter of my master's thesis. The space was a far cry from the grand dorm room I'd once imagined at Stanford, but it was entirely mine, paid for with scholarship money, work-study wages, and the slow but steady restitution payments that had been trickling in since Mom's sentencing. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya, now finishing her medical residency in Seattle. "Saw the conference live stream. You were amazing." Mom cried through the whole thing. "She's so proud of you." Maya had remained my closest friend through everything. Our bond strengthened rather than weakened by the crisis that had upended my life. She'd visited me countless times during my years at Cleveland State, had been the maid of honor at my small wedding to David, a fellow criminology student who understood the intersection of personal trauma and academic passion, and had celebrated every milestone in my journey from victim to advocate. The next message was from an unexpected source, Aunt Linda. Emma, I know we haven't spoken much since everything happened, but I wanted you to know that Jade saw your presentation online. She's been in therapy for 2 years now, working through a lot of guilt and anger. She asked me to tell you that she finally understands what she lost when she chose your mother's side over doing what was right.
She doesn't expect forgiveness, but she wanted you to know that she realizes now that you were the one trying to protect the family, not destroy it. I stared at the message for a long time, emotions cycling through surprise, sadness, and something that might have been relief. Jade's recognition didn't change what had happened, didn't erase the years of estrangement or the choice she'd made to prioritize her cosmetic surgery over our sisterly bond, but it suggested that she'd grown beyond the teenager who had called me vindictive for refusing to accept theft. I didn't respond to the message. I wasn't ready for that conversation. Might never be ready. But I didn't delete it either. Some acknowledgments deserved to exist, even if they couldn't lead to reconciliation. My laptop chimed with an email from the Department of Justice. I'd been selected for their summer internship program, working specifically with the White-Collar Crime Division on developing victim advocacy protocols for family financial abuse cases. The opportunity would allow me to influence policy at the federal level, to help create systems that supported victims like Sarah Kim, instead of forcing them to choose between justice and family relationships. The irony was complete. The girl who had once been victimized by family financial crime was now positioned to help write the federal response to such crimes. The theft that had derailed my original plans had ultimately led me to a career I couldn't have imagined at 18, one that gave meaning to the suffering I'd endured and purpose to the principles I'd refused to compromise. I opened my thesis document and scrolled to the conclusion I'd been struggling to write for weeks. The academic language felt insufficient for capturing the human cost of family financial abuse, the way it didn't just steal money but trust, didn't just derail plans but entire belief systems about how love was supposed to work. The criminal justice system's reluctance to prosecute family financial crimes creates a de facto immunity for perpetrators who exploit their closest relationships, I typed. This immunity sends a message that family bonds excuse criminal behavior, that victims should prioritize the comfort of their abusers over their own rights and safety. I paused, thinking about the 18-year-old girl who had once sat in a high school bathroom, staring at an empty bank account and wondering if reporting her own mother would make her a monster. That girl had been so afraid of being the villain in their family story that she'd almost accepted being the victim instead. But justice delayed is justice denied, and crimes excused are crimes enabled. Every victim who finds the courage to report family financial abuse does more than seek personal restitution. They break a cycle of normalized exploitation and create space for others to recognize that love and theft are not synonymous. My phone rang, interrupting my writing flow. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, the voice was achingly familiar despite the 5 years of silence. Emma? It's me. It's Mom. I sat in stunned silence, my heart pounding as Patricia Chen's voice traveled through fiber optic cables from whatever halfway house or supervised release facility she was calling from. I'd known this day might come. Her sentence included 3 years of supervised release after prison. But I hadn't prepared for the actual sound of her voice. I know I don't have the right to call. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. But I'm getting out next month, and I needed to say some things before I try to rebuild what's left of my life. What things? I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. That you were right. About everything. About justice mattering, about consequences being necessary, about me being a criminal rather than just a desperate mother. Her voice cracked on the words. I spent 5 years in federal prison thinking about what I stole from you, Emma. And it wasn't just money, Emma. It was your faith in family, your trust in the people who were supposed to protect you. It was your belief that love meant something more than pretty words that could be discarded when convenience demanded it. I listened without interrupting. Part of me still the 18-year-old girl who had desperately wanted her mother to understand, to take responsibility, to acknowledge the magnitude of what she'd done.
I know I can't make it right, Mom continued. I know the restitution payments don't give you back your Stanford dreams, don't repair the relationships I destroyed, don't undo the choice I made to value Jade's immediate happiness over your long-term future. But I needed you to know that I understand now why you did what you did, why you had to do what you did. Mom, no, let me finish, please. Her voice was stronger now, carrying a certainty I'd never heard from her before. I used to think you chose justice over family, but I understand now that I'm the one who made that choice. I chose crime over parenting, theft over support, enabling over accountability. You didn't destroy our family, Emma. You refused to pretend it wasn't already destroyed. The words I'd waited years to hear hit me with unexpected force. Not an apology. She tried those before, hollow attempts to repair damage without acknowledging its scope, but actual understanding. Recognition that the choice had never been between love and justice, but between enabling abuse and refusing to be victimized. I'm glad you called, I said finally, meaning it, despite the complex emotions her voice evoked. I needed to hear you say that. Will you... She hesitated, then seemed to gather courage. Would you ever consider seeing me? Not now. I know I need to prove that I've actually changed, that this isn't just pretty words designed to manipulate you into forgiveness. But someday, maybe, if you ever wanted to see what 5 years of consequences actually taught me. I thought about it seriously, weighing the girl I'd been against the woman I'd become. The devastated family relationships against the possibility of something rebuilt on honesty instead of manipulation. Maybe, I said, someday. But Mom, if we ever have that conversation, it can't be about forgiveness or reconciliation or getting back what we used to have. It would have to be about who we are now, what we've learned, how we've grown. It would have to be honest. I understand, she said, and for the first time in our entire relationship, I believed her. After hanging up, I sat in my quiet apartment for a long time, processing the conversation and its implications. The call didn't change what had happened, didn't erase the years of estrangement or the fundamental betrayal that had fractured our family. But it suggested that sometimes consequences actually worked, that sometimes people could learn from their mistakes rather than simply resenting the punishment they'd earned. I returned to my thesis, fingers moving across the keyboard with new purpose. The goal of family financial crime prosecution should not be revenge or punishment for its own sake. The goal should be accountability, creating a system where victims can seek justice without being told that love requires them to accept abuse, where perpetrators face meaningful consequences that encourage actual change rather than better manipulation tactics. My academic work was important, but it wasn't the only legacy of my experience. Over the past 5 years, I'd spoken to hundreds of victims of family financial abuse, many of them young adults whose parents or guardians had stolen education funds, inheritance money, or savings accounts. Through social media, advocacy organizations, and word of mouth, my story had become a touchstone for people struggling with the same impossible choice I'd faced at 18. The emails came regularly. Teenagers whose college funds had been borrowed for family emergencies that never seemed urgent enough to justify asking permission. Adult children whose elderly parents had been financially exploited by siblings, spouses whose partners had hidden debt and stolen joint savings. Each story was unique in its details, but familiar in its core conflict: the tension between love and justice, family loyalty, and self-protection. I'd learned to recognize the patterns, the initial discovery, the desperate hope that it was somehow a misunderstanding, the family pressure to work it out privately, the guilt and self-doubt that accompanied any consideration of involving authorities. Most victims never made it past that guilt. They absorbed the financial loss, accepted the betrayal, and spent years trying to rebuild trust with people who had proven themselves fundamentally untrustworthy.
But some found the courage to choose differently.
And those were the stories that made my advocacy work meaningful. Sarah Kim had eventually filed charges against her stepfather and used the restitution money to complete her master's degree in social work. Marcus Rodriguez had reported his brother for identity theft and credit fraud, leading to criminal charges and his own financial recovery. Jennifer Walsh had exposed her mother's embezzlement of her inheritance, resulting in federal prosecution and the recovery of nearly $80,000 that had been stolen over several years. Each successful case created ripple effects. Family members who learned that actions had consequences, other victims who found courage to speak up, attorneys and law enforcement officers who better understood the complexity of family financial crimes. The work was slow and sometimes heartbreaking, but it was changing how society understood the intersection of love and exploitation. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from David. How did the presentation go? The live stream kept cutting out, but what I saw looked amazing. Can't wait to hear all about it when you get home. Home. The word carried weight I was still getting used to. For years after leaving my childhood house, home had felt like a concept rather than a place. Something other people had, something I'd lost when I chose justice over family loyalty. But slowly, carefully, I'd built a new kind of home. Relationships based on honesty instead of obligation. Support that didn't come with conditions. Love that didn't require me to accept abuse or pretend that theft was somehow acceptable when motivated by desperation. David understood my work in ways that went beyond academic interest. His own family had been fractured by financial betrayal. An uncle who had embezzled from the family business, a grandfather who had been financially exploited by caregivers, and he'd seen firsthand how the pressure to keep it in the family often enabled continued abuse. Our relationship was built on shared values about justice, accountability, and the difference between forgiveness and enabling. I packed up my laptop and headed toward the apartment I shared with the man who had supported my thesis research, celebrated my academic achievements, and never once suggested that my pursuit of justice had been too harsh or unforgiving. The woman who had chosen consequences over comfort at 18 had found her tribe in people who understood that love and accountability weren't opposing forces. As I walked through Chicago's evening bustle, I thought about the 18-year-old girl who had stood in that FBI field office, terrified but determined to see justice done. She couldn't have imagined the path that would follow, the years of legal proceedings, the family estrangement, the academic focus that had grown from personal trauma. She certainly couldn't have imagined the sense of purpose that had emerged from the wreckage of her original plans. Stanford was still a dream deferred, but the University of Chicago had offered opportunities that wouldn't have existed in my original timeline. The girl who had planned to become a biomedical engineer had instead found her calling in the intersection of criminal justice and family psychology, using her experience to advocate for systemic changes that could help other victims. Sometimes the best outcomes weren't the ones we planned for. They were the ones we built from the ashes of our broken expectations, shaped by principles we refused to compromise, even when the cost seemed impossibly high. The next morning, I woke to an email that would change the trajectory of my advocacy work. The National Center for Victims of Crime was offering me a full-time position as their Director of Family Financial Abuse Programs, a newly created role that would allow me to develop policy recommendations, training materials, and victim support resources at the national level.
The position would begin after I completed my master's degree, and it came with the kind of salary and benefits that would finally make the dreams I'd put on hold seem achievable again.
More importantly, would give me a platform to influence how the criminal justice system handled cases like mine, to create the support systems I'd wished for during my own journey from victim to survivor. I accepted the position that afternoon, then called Dr. Martinez to share the news. Maya's mother had become my unofficial advisor through the years of academic and personal growth, offering the kind of maternal wisdom and support that my own mother had forfeited through her choices. "I'm so proud of you, Emma," Dr. Martinez said, her voice warm with genuine affection. "You've taken something terrible that happened to you and used it to help others. That takes a special kind of strength." "I just get tired of being the only one," I said. Tired of feeling like seeking justice made me some kind of family destroyer. If my story can help other people realize they're not choosing between love and accountability, then maybe it was all worth it. "It was worth it regardless," Dr. Martinez said firmly. "You deserved justice, you deserved to have your dreams protected, and you deserved a family that supported you instead of stealing from you. Everything else, the advocacy work, the academic achievements, the policy changes, those are bonuses. The real victory was refusing to accept abuse just because it came wrapped in family loyalty." That evening, I sat down to write the acknowledgments section of my thesis, struggling to find words that captured the complexity of my journey from victim to advocate. How do you thank the people who supported you through a process that required you to choose justice over family relationships? How do you acknowledge the mentors who helped you build a career from the ruins of your original plans? This work would not have been possible without the support of individuals who understand that love and accountability are not opposing forces, I wrote. To Agent Rebecca Torres, who showed me that seeking justice was not vindictive, but necessary. To Dr. Sarah Martinez, who demonstrated what unconditional family support actually looked like. To Maya Martinez, whose friendship proved that loyalty could coexist with honesty. To David Chen Williams, whose partnership has shown me that building a family on principles rather than convenience creates stronger bonds than biology ever could. I paused before writing the final acknowledgement, the one that felt both necessary and complicated. And to Patricia Chen, whose choices taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to hold them accountable for their actions, especially when that accountability comes at great personal cost. The thesis was submitted 3 weeks later, defended successfully before a committee that included specialists in family psychology, criminal justice policy, and victim advocacy. The defense was rigorous but supportive, with committee members asking probing questions about methodology and policy implications that pushed me to articulate the broader significance of my research. "Ms. Chen," asked Dr. Robert Harrison, the committee chair, "your research suggests that current approaches to family financial crime prosecution are inadequate. What specific policy changes would you recommend to better serve victims?" I'd been preparing for this question for months, but answering it still felt like distilling years of personal and academic experience into actionable recommendations. First, specialized training for law enforcement and prosecutors on the psychological barriers victims face when reporting family members. Many victims are told their cases are civil matters when they're actually criminal violations. Second, victim advocate programs specifically designed for family financial crimes, recognizing that these cases require different support than stranger-perpetrated theft. Third, legislative reforms that clarify when family financial exploitation rises to the level of criminal fraud, removing the ambiguity that currently protects perpetrators. The committee approved my thesis unanimously, with Dr. Harrison noting that my work represented a significant contribution to the intersection of family psychology and criminal justice policy. The academic validation felt meaningful, but the real measure of success would be whether my recommendations could actually help other victims navigate the choice between justice and family loyalty. Graduation day arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that made everything feel possible. Maya flew in from Seattle for the ceremony, and Dr. Martinez drove down from Cleveland with a car full of homemade celebratory food. David's parents had driven up from Indianapolis, along with his sister and her family.
The makeshift family that had formed around my choice to prioritize principle over convenience was small but fierce in their support. As I walked across the stage to receive my master's degree, I thought about the 18-year-old girl who had once planned to walk across a different stage at Stanford, wearing a cap and gown that would have been purchased with money stolen from her future. That ceremony had never happened, but this one felt more meaningful, earned through my own work, supported by people who chose to love me rather than people who were obligated to do so by biology. The reception afterwards was held in Maya's hotel suite, a casual gathering of the people who had become my chosen family over the years of rebuilding my life from scratch. Agent Torres had driven down from the Chicago field office with her partner and teenage daughter, bringing federal agency challenge coins as graduation gifts. Dr. Martinez presented me with a leather-bound journal engraved with the Maya Angelou quote that had sustained me through the darkest periods. "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." "You've told your story," she said as I hugged her tightly, "and in telling it, you've given other people permission to tell theirs." That night, as the celebration wound down and everyone headed back to their respective homes and hotel rooms, I found myself alone on the hotel balcony, looking out over Chicago's skyline. The city stretched toward the horizon in all directions, lights twinkling like possibilities waiting to be explored. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, Emma. My name is Rebecca Thompson, and I just read your thesis online. My stepmother stole my inheritance to pay for my stepsister's wedding, and I've been afraid to report it because everyone says it would destroy the family. After reading your work, I realized that she already destroyed the family when she chose to steal from me. Thank you for showing me that seeking justice doesn't make me the villain. I'm calling the FBI tomorrow." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility it represented. Somewhere in America, another young woman was preparing to make the same choice I'd made years ago, choosing accountability over enablement, justice over false peace, self-protection over family dysfunction. She would face the same guilt, the same pressure to work it out privately, the same accusations of being vindictive or heartless. But she would also have resources I hadn't possessed: advocacy organizations, legal precedents, academic research that validated her experience and supported her right to seek justice. The work was far from over. Family financial abuse remained underreported and underprosecuted. Victims continued to struggle with the psychological barriers to seeking help, and perpetrators continued to exploit the social expectation that family loyalty should trump legal accountability. But progress was being made, one case at a time, one victim finding courage at a time, one family learning that love required honesty rather than accepting it. I typed back, "Rebecca, you're making the right choice. It's hard, but it's necessary. You deserve justice, and seeking it doesn't make you the destroyer of your family. It makes you the one refusing to enable destruction. Be strong, be proud, and know that you're not alone." As I prepared to leave the hotel balcony and return to the quiet apartment where David was waiting with congratulatory flowers and takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, I felt the profound satisfaction that came from knowing my purpose. The girl who had once been devastated by her family's betrayal had become a woman who helped other victims recognize their own worth, their own rights, their own power to demand accountability from the people who claimed to love them. It hadn't been the path I'd planned, but it was the one I'd earned through refusing to compromise my principles when compromise would have been easier. And in the end, that made all the difference, not just for me, but for every Rebecca Thompson who would find courage in my story, every Sarah Kim who would choose justice over enabling, every victim who would learn that love and accountability could coexist if you were brave enough to demand both. The future stretched ahead like the city skyline, full of lights and possibilities, challenges and opportunities, the promise that work done with integrity and purpose could create ripples of change that extended far beyond any individual story. 5 years after filing that first FBI complaint, I was exactly where I needed to be. Not bitter, but better. Not broken, but rebuilt. Not destroyed by the choice between family and justice, but empowered by the recognition that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable the people who claim to love you. It was a hard lesson, learned at great cost, but it was true. And in a world where truth often came at a premium, that felt like the greatest victory of all. Emma's story proves that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most meaningful outcomes. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently about justice and family, please show your support by liking and sharing it. Your engagement helps stories like Emma's reach people who need to hear them most. Subscribe for more stories that tackle life's toughest decisions with unflinching honesty.